I was ashamed of my mother. This is how my story begins. I can't judge anyone, but this story impressed me and left a bitter aftertaste. I want you to listen to my story and feel the mother's love. A mother loves her child so much that she is willing to make any sacrifice for them, but children are cruel in relation to their parents. My mother had one eye. I was always ashamed of her because of it. I don't remember my father. I think he left us when I was a little kid. Because of her defect, it was difficult to find a normal job. Because of this, she had to take any paid work to feed our little family. But at that time, I didn't realize how hard it was for her. When I was in junior school, my mother worked as a cook at my school. I was ashamed of her, and I acted like I didn't know her during school dinners. I was afraid that if my friends found out about it, they would laugh at me. One day, she decided to go to class to check on me. My knees felt weak. Why did she do this to me? I almost fell through the ground. I pretended not to see her. I looked at her with hatred and ran away from there. The next day, a classmate friend of mine said to me, your mother is one-eyed." I wanted to sink through the ground. I wanted my mother to disappear somewhere. So that day, I met her, and I said to her, "Wouldn't it be better for you to die so as not to make me look ridiculous?" My mother didn't answer me. I didn't even think about what I was saying because I was very angry. I wasn't interested in her feelings. I didn't want her in the house. Growing up a little, I worked very hard. After saving up a little money, I went to Singapore to study. I got married there. I bought my own house. I had my own children and was happy with my life. One day, my mother came to see me. She hadn't seen me in years, and she didn't know her grandchildren. When she came to the door, my children started laughing at her. How could she come to my house and scare my children? I yelled at her, "Get out of here!" To this, my mother quietly replied, "I'm sorry, I think I came to the wrong address," and then disappeared from my sight. One day, I got a letter from my school about an alumni meeting. I told my wife as an excuse that I was going on a business trip. She didn't know I had a mother like that, and I tried not to talk about it. After the reunion, I went to my old house just out of curiosity. The neighbor said my mother was dead. It didn't make me sad at all. I was given a letter that my mother left for me. It was written, "My most beloved son, I have always thought of you, and I am very sorry that I came to Singapore and scared your children. I was very happy when I heard you were coming to the reunion, but I didn't know if I could get out of bed to see you. I am very sorry that you were constantly ashamed of me when you were growing up. You know, my child, when you were little, you had an accident and lost your eye. I couldn't bear, like your mother, to see you grow up with one eye. That's why I gave you my eye. And now I'm so proud of you, thinking that you can see with that eye instead of me. With all my love, your mother." Love and appreciate your mothers. After all, they love you with all their heart and are ready to do anything for you. Hi guys, my name is Matthew. In life, sometimes unthinkable things happen and people do not deliberate their actions. I want to tell you about how my foster parents sold me to my mom for $500,000. This phrase sounds absurd, but believe me, this happens in life. I hope my story will serve as a lesson to many. My story started from my birth. My mother got pregnant when she was only 17, naturally by accident. As she says, the father was her age and afraid of responsibility and disappeared somewhere. And she didn't have any relatives, so she grew up as an orphan. And so she had to face this problem, so to speak, one-on-one. I understand that it was not easy for her, because she was in fact still a child, and she didn't have a lot of money. The only solution was to leave me in an orphanage. But as you know, children are not well looked after there. Any mother wishes her child a good life, and she decided to take a dangerous and illegal step. She found a couple on the internet named Emma and Daniel, and right after I was born, she sold me to them for $1,000. So I didn't even know for a long time who my parents really were. Emma had problems with infertility. Doctors diagnosed her that she could not have any children. At first, they seemed to love me very much and treated me like their native child. They bought me everything new, took me to different entertainment places, and took care of my education. Everything seemed to be fine, right? But medicine does not stand still. Soon, when they found treatment for infertility, Emma was the first in line. A miracle happened and she was able to get pregnant. She also had a son named Michael. They were overjoyed. I do not know what happened, but with the birth of their own son, they began to treat me more rudely, not as their own biological child. At that time, I did not know that I was adopted, and so it was very strange for me why they treated me like this. They stopped paying attention to me. I even got used to the fact that I was often forgotten to be picked up from school. They took Michael to different courses while I started doing household chores after school at an early age. If Michael bought new toys, then his old and broken ones were given to me, and everything else like that. This cruel attitude towards me was manifested more and more every time. Over time, they began to scold me for the slightest mistake or fault. Every time I did something wrong, Daniel pulled out his leather belt. Of course, they were only trying to scare me, but I didn't even have to do anything wrong, or I could just be in the wrong place at the wrong time. When I turned 16, my parents said they were not going to pay for my studies anymore, and they did not care that I would drop out of school. But I didn't want to do that, so I had to get a job to somehow find money for the contract. Fortunately, the owner of the local fast food restaurant agreed to take me to work for half the rate. It gave me hope. I performed all the tasks that were given to me with great responsibility. After school, I immediately went to work and was there until night. Every day. At first, I washed the dishes in the restaurant. Not to say that's a good job, but I liked the feeling that I could earn money on my own. After all, they say there is no bad work. Our team was also very friendly. It was even more pleasant to be there than at home. At least no one scolded me there, and my parents didn't even think of where I was or what I was doing. I think it was even easier for them that I wasn't home at all. Seeing my efforts, the chief decided to promote me and appointed me to a new position. I became a cashier and already took orders from guests. This was career growth, so to speak. I kept up with my studies. In my free time, I did my homework, so it was all right. But once I noticed that one woman began to frequent our fast food restaurant. She looked like she was well off, and for me, people like her rarely go to places like that. She only ordered coffee every day and could sit and watch me for hours. I couldn't figure out what she wanted from me, but I didn't dare ask. She also ordered only from me. Even when I was busy, she waited until I was free. You could say it even scared me. She watched my every move intently. You know how creepy it is if you're being watched all the time by someone you don't know? One day, I had to stay after work and clean the hall as a duty officer, and all the visitors had already left. But this woman didn't leave. When I went to warn her about the closing, she took my hand and asked me to sit down and talk. I was shocked by this, but I still sat down. She introduced herself as Linda and asked me to listen and understand. She said that she was my biological mother and told me how she went to such a step and, so to speak, sold me. After all, she was very young and helpless. But now she works for a prestigious firm and has a good home. And since the moment she lost me, she couldn't calm down about it and gave her word that no matter what, she would find me. My brain did not perceive this information, and I could not believe what she was saying, and this was nonsense. But at the time, I thought about it. The thought never left my mind. I decided to check with my parents, as it were, whether this was actually true. This news greatly surprised and angered them. Emma said that yes, it really was true. And if I want to, then I can go to her, but on one condition, that I will have to work and return all the money they spent on me since my childhood. Well, that's about $500,000. Well, until I could pay them, they took my documents. I hated being around them, so I packed my backpack and went to work. I wanted to pay the money as soon as possible and never see them again. I spent the night secretly at work so the chief didn't know. I slept in the back room, and in the morning I went to school. Since the last conversation with Linda, she had stopped coming, and I hadn't seen her for a long time. But I really didn't care. I knew in my heart that this was my real mother. A week later, Emma called me and told me to come home immediately, but I didn't want to see them, so I turned off my phone so they wouldn't bother me, and quietly worked on. Whatever happened, I didn't care. Then Linda came to us one day. She had an envelope in her hand, and with tears in her eyes, she asked me to listen to her. She slipped me the envelope and told me that she took my documents and paid all the money that Emma and Daniel demanded from me. I was shocked because this is not a small amount. Unless she has such savings, in fact, it turned out that she sold her house, car, and even jewelry for this. But why, do you ask? Any mother would do anything for her child, and for Linda, it was not a pity to lose everything so long that her son did not suffer. She was very sorry that she sold me, and from that moment she realized her huge mistake. Now my biological mother and I live together, but in a rented apartment. I'm not used to calling her mom yet, but I try. But all this is not important because I really felt now what a mother's love is. In life, everything happens, and sometimes people do not deliberate and do terrible things. Share what interesting stories you had. Maybe something similar happened to your friends.